Hey, Winos! Welcome to episode 8 of Wine with HR. In this episode, we are going to be talking about some of the most common issues that HR is confronted with. Some of these we've talked about before, so we're just going to briefly touch on those. Other ones we haven't talked about in a while or haven't talked about yet. So we thought this would be a nice way to head into summer. And hopefully we'll have some lighter hearted topics for the next few weeks to get you through all these hot summer days. But of course, before we get started, we have to go through our WINE. So, Trish, what is in your glass today?
Well, first I have to show my glass off. Check it out. So excited about that. So that was the most important. I'm very, very proud of that. My wine today is called Pine Ridge.
Oh, I love that one.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Deborah loves it too. So
Really?
there's a wine that all three of us like. That's,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I just gave again, so I wouldn't drink the whole thing and forget about Will. Gave him a nice big glass ahead of time. Told him I was like, it's just one big one, so make it last. But he loved it too, and so yeah, I'm very excited. For those of you who haven't heard of this one, it's a Chenin Blanc and a Viognier. And the description that caught me at the store: an exceptional blend offering a lively bouquet of mouth-watering honeydew melon, juicy pomelo, I think is how you say it, and sweet starfruit aromas that dance with hints of soft white floral and sponge sugar. The crisp palate leads with ripe fruit flavors of pineapple, lychee, right?
Mhm.
Lychee. Okay.
Lychee.
Lychee. Meyer lemon and fuzzy white peach. So delicious. And then when it says on the back of the label, enjoy a glass on its own or try it alongside your favorite seafood or spicy dish. And I can absolutely see it with both. I'm thinking like a vegetarian spicy dish though versus like a meat spicy dish, just based on the little sips that I've had so far. But I haven't had like a full sip, so give me a sec. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely all three of us will be having this together. That is delicious. One more thing I have to show, Jules. More merch. Check it out. Can you see it?
It looks great.
I love it. Yeah, I'm super, super excited about it. So one of our shirts that is now available on our store. And Julie, I see you have a different hat on. Can you like feature your hat and tell us what you're drinking?
Absolutely. Yes. So this is one of our Wine with HR hats with all the colors of the logo. I really love these hats. They fit very nicely. They're adjustable. So big head, small head, we got you covered. Literally. Not on pump. But no, I wore it out for a walk over the weekend, and it was great because it was one of those like squinty days where you don't quite need your sunglasses, but you need a little bit of help. So it was great. So yes, we have this one. We also have a denim colored one, which Trish, I think, has shown off before with a white logo. I am also have my Pride glass, which again, even though Pride Month is over, we continue to support all of our LGBTQ plus friends and colleagues. And so anytime somebody purchases something with the Pride logo on it, the proceeds will go to the Trevor Project for the rest of the year. So whenever you want, go check out the stuff. I'm drinking something very interesting today. So I have to first give a shout out to Eric Schmidt. He's one of our longtime wine listeners. He's also my banker. Also to his branch manager, Leo. They're wonderful, wonderful guys. So Eric had been telling me about this wine last year called Key Lime Pie from Oliver Winery and I could not find it anywhere. So he gave me a bottle when I saw him recently. And it is, Trish and I have a theme with the wine bottles today with the green labels. So, anyway, it's a very pretty bottle. It's at, for those of you in Ohio, he said the best place to find it is Giant Eagle. Now, I am sipping out of one of my little Grazie wine glasses with this particular wine because it is a dessert wine and I am not a huge sweet wine person. So I'm just having a little taste, but wanted to make sure that I tasted it on one of our episodes since he recommended it. So, shout out to Eric. Key lime pie. It's an apple wine, so not grape, but apple wine. And it says, pour yourself a slice and enjoy. Refreshing and festive, sweet yet tart key lime, sweet meringue swirls, and hints of graham cracker crust. No forks required. Serve extra chilled on a bright summer day. It is a bright summer day, so we got that part covered. So here we go. It tastes exactly like key lime pie. It's kind of
Wait,
crazy.
what? Are you
Yes,
serious? You know key lime's like my favorite.
mine too. Mine too. Yes. And it does have hints of graham cracker. I don't know how they do that. So, if you like sweet wines or dessert wines, or you have friends and family who do this, would probably actually be great for um, summer celebrations. But it is sweet. So, I would suggest small glasses. But I have to say, it's pretty impressive that they got something to taste exactly like a key lime pie. So I'm impressed.
I'd like just a little shot of it to try it. It sounds really, really cool. It is amazing to me what people can do with wine. Now that we have the WINE out of the way, well, at least the descriptions, because we'll be dealing with the WINE the whole time. Let's switch to the WHINE. We are actually coming to you this week. We are coming to you this week live. That's what that sounded like. Um, this is an article that Julie found that I think is just fantastic because it really does summarize all of the things that Julie and I have already been talking to you about and some things that she and I want to talk to you about in the future. So it's the 10 common HR issues, and the best part, and how to solve them. It's just not someone complaining and saying, oh, yeah, these are the problems we have. We're actually going to give you tools, which of course is right up Julie and my alley because that's what we like to do for y'all. So this is from Talent Recruity blog. And let's see, this is from 2024, but I really do feel like it's more relevant now, maybe than it was even in August. So I am super excited to get to these. Jules, where do you think you want to start?
I think so. Let me just back up for a second there, get my thoughts in order. So, as Trisha mentioned, one of the reasons we chose this article is because it really does a nice job of doing challenges and solutions. And so, of course, we will put it in the show notes for you. The first couple of things have to do a lot with recruiting and employee engagement and retention, which we've talked a lot about in the last couple of episodes. So, we're going to focus on numbers 7 through 10. And then if we have time left over at the end, we'll cover some of the other ones. So I am going to go to number 7, which is balancing senior leadership wants versus employee needs, which I think can be a real struggle for companies and particularly for HR professionals because and managers because HR professionals and managers are often stuck in the middle and they're trying to balance both, and a lot of times there is a disconnect between what leadership wants to do and what the employees think is necessary. Little stat for you, stealing Trisha's thunder right off the bat here, but so
I'll
according
let
to
you do it. It's okay.
thanks, just this once, right? Just this once.
Just this once.
Okay, so according to a report by Achievers, only 27% of employees feel that leadership is adequately trained to lead through changes, indicating a significant gap between leadership capabilities and employee expectations. And so, again, this is a middle ground where HR tends to be stuck in and probably is going to be for the foreseeable future. And a lot of times that comes from a misalignment of priorities. So, senior leadership is often focusing on strategic goals while employees prioritize day to day satisfaction and work life balance. And when they're focusing on those strategic goals, sometimes they can't see the tree for the forest because they're more worried about, the bottom line, increasing profits, whatever those big goals are. And sometimes they can forget what it's like for employees to work on a day to day basis. Communication gaps, we talk about communication all the time, but a lot of times leadership is at the highest levels, they're having those conversations in only those leadership groups, and the information is not getting out to the employees. And as Trisha always stresses, how important the why is, that why is not trickling down. And oftentimes, I'm sure the managers who are listening can relate, you guys are stuck trying to guess what the why is, or trying to, tell employees that they have to do something without knowing the why yourself. And that can be really frustrating for everybody because then, you might get to a point where you're like, just do it. And it doesn't leave anybody feeling good about anything. So and then the last thing is, everybody is resistant to change. So if leadership is trying to make big changes, there are communication gaps. They haven't explained the why, and they haven't shown employees why those changes are important. Then, of course, employees are going to be resistant to implement those changes. So, before we get to some solutions, I want to get Trisha's thoughts on what I just talked about.
I was so happy you pointed out the why because you know that that is exactly where my head was when you were talking. I think that one of the things that well, let me back up a little bit. One of the things that Julie and I both talk about all the time is that fact that our managers, bless y'all, okay, but you are promoted and not given the tools to succeed. And this, I think, is one of the places where it is most evident because, again, if you are not given the tools on how to relay information, whether you have the why or not, it can really, really backfire on you. Let's just put it that way. Because if you yourself are upset about the change, if you have foreseen something negative and then you just go to your employees and you're like, oh, well, this is so stupid. Can you believe management wants us to do that? I don't know what they're thinking. Well, are your employees going to give it a shot? No way in heck. So, what we really want you to do is change your delivery, change your focus, even if you don't know the why. First of all, ask what the why is. But if you don't get it, or if it takes a while, just remember to really be positive in yourself. You yourself, like Julie mentioned, we all are a bit resistant to change. So try to figure out what that resistance is on your part and then approach it from a totally different perspective. Talk to your employees about it and really tell them like, listen, I don't know if this is going to work. I want this to work, so I need you to really give it a good try and then come back and tell me what is working. And here's my favorite part, and all my classes have heard this. And then tell us what we could still improve. Not what isn't working, because we don't want a bunch of complaints, but the what we could still improve. I guess I'm moving right on to solutions and didn't even realize it. What we could still improve allows people to come back and tell you, here's what I'm thinking. And I think that if they feel like they're a part of things, if they are know that they're going to be heard, then maybe that resistance to change would be muted a little bit.
I think that's a brilliant idea, Trish, and it goes right with one of the solutions, which is involving employees in the decision making. And even if you can't involve them in the decision making, the aftermath, as you suggested, like, hey, okay, this has been done. How can we improve it? And get their thoughts. But if you can find a way to allow for some employee feedback or participation in big changes that are going to be systemic, that it would be really helpful because you're giving those employees a voice. So whether that is through town halls or open forums or, whatever ways that you get information to employees and can get some information back. So again, communication shouldn't be a one-way street. It should be two ways. It should be going flowing, from top to bottom and bottom to top. Um, Another thing, like think about different ways that you can communicate because again, we don't all have the same communication style. So one thing that one of my clients has started doing, which I think is really cool, is they have started a podcast. And it's just for employees at this company, but the one of the presidents gets on and brings somebody from another department and talks to them about what they do. And it's also like they're short, they're like 20 minutes, so much shorter than our podcast. But hey,
I'm
we like
really
to talk.
impressed. I don't know.
Yeah, the only way ours is ever going to be 20 minutes is if you put it on like triple speed. And
True.
then we'll sound like chipmunks. It'd be hilarious. Try it. Tell us what you think.
With wine.
With wine, yes. Anyway, but that's kind of a cool idea because one of the things, and the reason they started this, which I also think is brilliant, because again, it shows that they know their people and are thinking about the best ways to communicate with them. But they have a lot of people who are on the road constantly. So it's easy for them to, turn on a podcast in their car while they're driving and listen to something for 20 minutes. So I thought that was such a cool idea. There's Oh, go ahead, Trish. Looked
I
like you
was
wanted
gonna
to say something.
Well, I was gonna say, I believe it's that same client where in the past they have been tapped as an employer of choice, and instead of saying this is what it means to us, they went to the employees and said, "Well, what does it mean to you?" And we did the town hall, and what did we have? Like a third of their employees, maybe even more than a third, that really wanted to be a part of those meetings. And I, again, was so impressed by that. And it really does go to show you your employees want to be involved if you give them the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've done a lot of cool things. And I thought like this one was just so creative because it's another way to get information out. But they're also asking for employees to tell them what topics they want to hear about, and it could be everything from, hey, this new policy came out, we're not real sure about it, we've got questions, or it could be like, hey, talk about this safety award we just got, or it could be any number of things. So
That's
um
brilliant.
yeah, yeah, really cool. So that's one way is again involve employees in the decision making, find better ways to communicate, find different ways to communicate, meet your employees where they're at. If you have a lot of employees who are in the car, something like a podcast is a really great idea. If you have a lot of people who are at their desks all the time, maybe it's something different. But just kind of think about that and think outside the box to other ways and other things that you might be able to do to engage people to get that feedback about the direction the company's going in and any significant changes that might be coming down the pike. So, Trish, what's your next topic?
Well, very unlike me, I'm actually going to go right in order because I don't know why, but I feel like that kind of just flows into budgeting. As we're having conversations and things are changing, and everybody is facing, I would say, tighter budgets these days. I think this is one, especially, look, I know it impacts every department, but I really do feel like it impacts HR quite differently. And the reason why is because we actually touch every single aspect of the company. So when our budgets are restricted, it is going to basically impact every single department, some more than others, but it will definitely impact. So that's where I thought I would go. The challenges that they mentioned in the article, the first one, of course, is resource allocation. So if we do have these limited budgets, who gets what we have? How much do we keep for just HR? How much do we keep for maybe doing fun stuff for our employees? So if you do have, let's say, a limited budget for training, where do you focus your training? Do you focus it at the top, the middle, the bottom? Do you try to spread it out throughout? What about your employee benefits? I think this is a huge one. If you are trying to get off the ground, some of these programs that Julie and I have talked about that can be so fun and impactful for your employees, especially when it comes to retention and engagement, those words that are really our theme this year, unintentionally, but they seem to be our theme this year. Um, how are you going to do that if you don't have any money in your budget to work on some of those? So that would be, I think, one of the big challenges. The second one, kind of going into that same realm, is the limits on initiatives and perks. So if we don't have a lot of money for recruiting and training and benefits, clearly we're not going to have the money for those benefits and perks as well. And so, again, going back to what I just said, how is that going to make your employees feel? Are they going to feel valued? If you are doing some of these other things that we're talking about, if you are maybe you're having a tougher year where you're doing layoffs, maybe you're trying to downsize in some fashion. Well, how is that going to impact your employees? And then all of a sudden they're like, well, wait a minute. Now we've lost these perks. We've lost this. We've lost that. And oh, am I next on the chopping block? So you start to see those kind of thoughts come in. And then again comes the disengagement and people just jumping ship. The other thing is, we always talk about, Julie and I are huge on promoting from within and really educating your employees. We've talked, I think, at least 5 different times about the benefits of doing that for your employees and how a lot of employees will actually stay at a place where they make less money. Again, if I think it was 80, what was it, Jules? Do you remember? 85, 88% or something ridiculous like that. People will stay at a job where they make less money if they're given the opportunity to improve their skills, these opportunities to learn. And really, it isn't ridiculous because I know I would do the absolute same. Anybody would, as evidenced by the stat. So when you get a limited budget, then your compensation packages are going to go down, your opportunities for these skill developments are going to go down. Jules, do you want any commentary before I go on to solutions?
No, but I want to talk to you after you talk about solutions because I have one that came into my head as you were talking about potential solutions that is not included in the article, but goes with what we were just talking about. So,
Oh, all right. I'm excited. Well, then let's talk about the solutions from the article. I will get there and then I'm feeling very like in suspense. I want to know what you're going to say. So the first solution that they offer is find efficiencies. And you all know that we love HR software. Obviously, we do partner with Bamboo HR. They're one of our absolute favorites. And for all of the reasons that they talk about here, we can streamline processes, they can help find areas where you can improve, and they really just help you make an impact on these areas where that you think, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. That is just the way it is. Going back to, again, the whole recruiting idea, right? oh, well, there aren't enough people, there's not enough time, I have to do it this way. Well, when you start really kind of turning it around and looking at some of these solutions that are available, I think you can find ways to improve efficiencies and then therefore maybe free up some funds. And that's the thing I think a lot of people don't realize is yes, these softwares, they do cost money, but they free up a lot of time and they create these efficiencies that allow you to utilize your time better and your employees' time better. The second thing that they say as a solution is focus on those high impact areas. And what they mean by that is prioritizing HR initiatives that offer the highest ROI, return on investment, one of our leaders' favorite words. I think one of my favorite things is to be able to go into when you're talking to senior leadership and being able to say, oh, I understand why you think that this appears to be a waste of money, but let me show you what happened last year. And then showing them the stats, the facts, figures, all the numbers, the impact that some of the lack of training, for example, has had on maybe the number of investigations we've had to do or our employee engagement being lacking, which means that we have a lot of turnover. And of course, when you have a lot of turnover, you all know what happens is that you have to spend more money to bring people in. So we've even talked about, Julie and I have said anywhere, depending on the level of employee, $3,500 to $35,000 per employee. So you really want to look at those high impact areas and focus on the things that you can do as a company that, and again, if you can put the numbers in there to your senior leadership, they're really going to appreciate and understand what it is you're trying to do. This is, I've used this term before, this is the way that you show that you're not just a money taker, that you can be a money maker for them as well. And then again, look to collaborate with others. You have some amazing skills. There's no doubt. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But you don't always want to go it alone. So, listening to the podcast is a great start, but definitely look to others, to like us and others, to help provide you training that can explain some of the opportunities that you might have with utilizing benefits that you may not have thought of before, and then any other HR services that can help you actually optimize your costs. So those are the solutions they presented. All right, Julie, I'm dying. What is yours?
Okay, well, building up all this anticipation. Not sure it's going to be that incredible, but no, I was thinking that one of the if you do get to a point where you have to limit perks or you can't add perks that maybe you've talked about adding, uh, a great thing to do would be to ask employees what they want to keep, like what's most important to them, but also what are potentially some cost neutral perks that they would like in lieu of whatever it is you're having to suspend or take away or can't implement yet because of a budgeting issue. So it just kind of goes with what we were just talking about. Communication is key, and sometimes it might surprise you because my assumption is from just the amount of employees I talk to that a lot of them will say, just more time off, more flexibility with my schedule, or, and more time off could
Flexibility,
be, yes,
100%.
yes.
Yep.
And more time off could also be like a half day. It doesn't necessarily have to be like we have to double our PTO or anything like that, but just an extra day here or there, or an extra half a day, extra 2 hours, whatever it is. But ask them, like, again, I think a lot of times we assume we know what employees would want, and we're often not right about that. So, because again, most of the time we're thinking about big changes and like, oh, we can match your contributions to your 401k. Okay, well, there are certain employees who are going to be over the moon about that. There's other employees who are like, I don't contribute to my 401k yet because I'm 22 and invincible and I don't need to worry about that yet. Or,
And paying
you
off
know,
student loans.
right, I'm paying off student loans or any number of things, and that might not be what they want. So I think it's really important to keep that communication up, particularly if a company is going through a challenging time period. You know, if there is like one of the things, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, but that still continues to be a problem. And this is one of the things that is addressed in the article that we're only going to get back to if we have time, but is remote work where people signed up for their job or took a job because it was remote. And now companies are saying you got to come into the office 3 days a week, 4 days a week, every day. And people are just like, I will look for another job then. Like, that's
Oh
not what
yeah.
we agreed upon, you know?
Yeah.
But there's just, it's from what I have seen when companies do that, they just send out a memo saying, as of such and such a date, time to come back in, and there's no why, there's no explanation, there's no exceptions, there's just no talk about it whatsoever. And obviously that is going to make people feel very betrayed and bitter. So not good for any of the other things we keep talking about, like employee retention and all of those things. The other thing I was thinking about, and we are going to do an episode that is focused on um, strategic HR and HR getting a seat at the C-suite level. But you've heard us say it before. We know that HR people tend not to be math people, but you got to keep data. So if you can use metrics, even especially during those challenging years where maybe you have budget constraints and you have other things like that. If you can keep track of that and still show that you made a difference. Now, the difference you need to show to the C-suite is different than what you need to show to the employees. But to the C-suite, if you can somehow reduce turnover during a challenging year, that's only going to get you a bigger budget the next year because they're going to look at that and say, oh my gosh, they really helped us. We didn't lose as many employees, so we didn't have to spend as much to get new employees. And that is the magic of data. That's why Trisha loves her stats so much. It's just that is the magic of it because it makes it all objective versus subjective, which most of HR is subjective. It's touchy feely, it's emotions, it's all of those types of things that are hard to quantify. But if you can put numbers behind that, then when budgets do have to be cut, you have an argument as to why yours shouldn't be one of them.
I'm loving that so much. You hit like all my favorites. You hit the why, you hit the stats. I really do think it is important for HR to realize, and Julie and I have said this at least in three different episodes just this season already. You really need to be able to, like she's saying, show those stats. It is your why. If you just ask for a training, if you ask for this in your budget and you don't have the data to back up your why, or if you don't have, hey, look, we don't have any data because we haven't done this yet. But let me show you what other companies have done and the improvements that it's made for them and what kind of, again, return on investment that could bring for us. So
I agree 100%. So don't be afraid of the numbers, even if initially the numbers are bad, because then you can show a vast improvement. So it's kind of, it could be a good thing if the numbers are bad to begin with, because then, you got nowhere to go but up. So,
I love it.
okay. So we're all about positivity here today.
Definitely.
Okay. So the next one that I want to talk about is change management. So you've probably heard this word, it's a buzzword, and you're probably thinking, like, what the heck does that mean? It literally means managing big changes in an organization. So,
What? That's it?
That's it. That's it. They made it, they made it sound like a big, lofty thing that's super complicated, but it's not. Although most companies don't do it right. So here's a couple stats for you. So, according to a report from Willis Towers Watson, a staggering 70% of change initiatives fail in some capacity, with poor leadership being the primary culprit.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean,
No,
like,
no.
nobody's ever going to approve any change if it only succeeds 30% of the time. So we gotta work on that. Um, because of that high failure rate, the employee's perception of change, not surprisingly, isn't great. Only 43% of surveyed employees say their organization is good at managing change, and only 25% say that it's a strength amongst their senior leaders. So the people who've been around the longest
Ouch.
apparently suck the worst at
Ouch.
it. So yeah, that's painful. So again, the challenges tend to be some of the things we've already talked about because these things all go together, but employee resistance. So if the company has said or the organization has said in the past, we're going to make these changes and then they failed for whatever reason, even if it was out of somebody else's control or whatever the case may be. But if they haven't been implementing the changes they've promised previously, then employees, of course, are not going to trust that it's going to happen this time. Why would they? Right? So,
Right.
um, so that's a big one, employee resistance. So, right off the bat, if you are planning to make a change, you've got to have a plan for how you're going to show employees that it's actually happening. So that might mean breaking it down into smaller goals or objectives and then shouting it from the rooftops when you make those benchmarks. Another thing, again, from a tip we already said, if you involve employees in the process, so like, hey, we're going to have a change management committee for this particular change we're implementing, and we're going to have the employees on there, a couple of employees, so that they can tell us if they're seeing those changes, if they're working, if they're not, where there are hiccups, where there's room for improvement, those kinds of things that can help a lot too. And again, I'm jumping into solutions too because it's so hard to talk about problems without giving you a solution because that's what
It
we do.
truly is.
It's
That's us.
yeah, so I apologize for that. I jumped ahead. The other two big challenges are communication barriers, which again, we've talked about. Oftentimes, the C suite level or higher levels of leadership are having these discussions in a silo, and they're not telling employees or mid level managers or HR. Half the time, HR doesn't even know what's going on, right? We get left in the dark a lot. So, um, that can be a real big challenge. And then the last one is change fatigue. So again, that sounds like a buzzword, but it's true. If an organization is constantly making changes, then people get overwhelmed because it's too much to keep track of. So you also want to keep that in mind when you are developing a plan. Don't try to do everything at once. Don't try to do 20 things at once. Like pick something, focus on it, work
And
on
give it
that.
time to work. Actually,
Give it
give it
time to
time to
work.
work. That
Yes.
is my, like, you see that happen all the time. Companies are like so excited about this change and they're rolling it out and they're not seeing the changes that they thought or the improvements, and all of a sudden it's gone.
I agree. Well, and it reminded me of something like, again, we need to tell employees what they should be looking for to know that the change is happening because they may not know. So I was thinking about, I just had a recent doctor's appointment and they put me on a new medication. And my question, which I have learned through the years to ask, is not how will I know this is working, but what am I looking for as symptom relief, like, because it's not going to erase my pain entirely, it's not going to fix everything. So what am I looking for to know if it's helping or not, and I have found that's a really good question. So I think you could apply that in a change management scenario where you have employees that you're getting feedback from and saying like, hey, Here's how you're going to know this is happening. Like, here's the rollout, here's the initial changes that are going to happen, here's phase two, here's phase three. We want you to hold us accountable if you're not seeing this. But I think the big thing, one of the solutions, and I'm just kind of taking everything that the article says and combining it with my own ideas, but is I would have a change management committee that has, for each change that you're doing, that has employees that it makes sense to have on that change management committee, on that committee, so that you are have somebody from every single level, so you can see where the gaps are, where things are getting lost in translation, where maybe it's not going quite as you thought it was going to go. Because how many times, I know a lot of us have been through this, where like leadership's like, oh, we're going to do this, it's going to be fantastic, and then the employees who are affected by it every day are like, that's never going to work because of X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, oh yeah, that didn't work because of X, Y, and Z. Like
Well,
our employees are our experts. They're the ones doing the job day in, day out, so we need their input about what changes make sense or don't make sense.
and that goes to exactly what you're saying when you said have those employees that make sense. Because we're not telling you all to have employees just for the sake of having employees. The people that you're going to choose to be a part of these groups are the ones who are most severely impacted or may be in a position to see how it impacts them both positively and negatively. So it's not just, oh, let's have these people in there. We still, believe me, both of us, too many chefs in a kitchen is a real, real thing. That is not what we're telling you to do.
Right. Like, for example, if you are implementing new sales tracking software, then you just need a couple employees that are salespeople. Like, you don't need somebody from accounting. Or somebody who works out in the field every day. Like, you need the people who it impacts the most. So, and if you're making changes to equipment on the shop floor, you need the people who run that equipment, run the equipment you're trying to replace, and would run the equipment that you're going to replace it with. So, it's just kind of about thinking you want as many perspectives as possible, because that's going to help you identify potential pitfalls and hopefully avoid them. So the last solution for change management, which I think is fantastic, that is mentioned in the article, and a little bit outside the box, because I'm not sure that you would necessarily think about it, but is supporting mental health. So again, change is hard. And if there are things like change fatigue, and there's patterns that the company hasn't followed through on things, then you want to provide support to your employees to help them manage the stress that comes along with big changes, and also be more adaptable. And that may include things like counseling or stress management workshops or other things like that. But I think we need to normalize talking about how change is difficult. It can lead to good things, it can lead to improvement. But, I think we tend to minimize it a lot, because we'll say, like, yeah, we're making this change. We know you guys are nervous about it, but it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Just trust us. Well, what's your track record? Right? Because, like we talked about, if you haven't done a very good job of it before, then that's not going to be great. So I thought that that was really thinking outside the box, but being very proactive. So I love that, supporting mental health.
And that goes with one of the other things that we often tell people, which is normalize conversations around your EAP, right? Your employee assistance programs. Normalize those conversations. If you have a weekly newsletter, a monthly newsletter, whatever it is, every single time feature something different from your EAP so that your employees get used to hearing about it. They understand what it's used for. Because what I've seen is that when people don't normalize those conversations, when they say, oh, well, we have this EAP, they go, what are you saying? I have some mental health issue? Like, okay, first of all, if you do, that's okay because there's no difference between a biological health issue and a mental health issue. They are the same. I'm here to tell you, all right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that it is because there has been this stigma around mental health and EAPs. They have not been widely advertised. They have not been really understood by our employees. They think that we're going to know if they use it, and none of that is good or true. So make sure that you can again normalize the conversation, not just supporting the mental health, but really normalizing it and letting people know the resources that you have available. If you have something outside of your EAPs, fantastic. Feature it, let them know what it is.
So important.
Mhm.
It's just a cause dear to my heart because I think there are so many people that are suffering, um, and they often feel they can't talk about it. And as we've said many times before, you bring your whole self to work. Like you can't separate out what is going on in your personal life. And if you're struggling with anything, any big major life change or stressor, it's going to make it harder for you to be you at work. And then on top of that, if there's a stigma around asking for help, that's obviously not going to be the ideal outcome. So the more we can normalize just like, hey, not only is it totally okay to say you need some help, but we've got this great program, and again,
Sure.
most of the times your EAP is free. It's part of your health insurance or part of the premiums that you pay. It's free to employees. It's a great resource. And so one of the things that I would say is if leaders were willing to share that they used EAP services, I think that would make it
Mhm.
much easier for employees to do as well. So, again, like making ourselves vulnerable, this is not in the article, but making ourselves vulnerable, sharing our own experiences. When leadership does that, it's really, really powerful. So, I think, again, we've probably said enough on it, but mental health is only going to continue to be a bigger and bigger issue. And I do think a lot of that is because we are more comfortable talking about it, not as comfortable as we should be. We haven't normalized it yet, but we're more comfortable talking about it. But also just because the world's way more stressful now. So, like, and again, you never
Way
know
more
what's going
stressful.
way more stressful, which is why we keep drinking. No,
Cheers.
cheers. but but I just think it's, especially if it is coming in the midst of a big change or what we're going to talk about next. I'm just putting it up on a T for you, Trish. But like
Thank
in the
you.
case of reductions in force, like if we're about to hit a difficult time, then that is definitely when we need to remind everybody, if you have counseling services, EAP, things like that, that those resources are there for them, and to keep saying it so that people don't forget. But so, Trish, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I didn't give you an option to jump around. I just, because you said we were going in order. So um, tell us about reductions in force.
Rifts have existed for as long as businesses, right? So that's the first thing. But I really do think, and as the article very, very wisely points out, that since COVID, since 2020, just 2020 alone, we don't even have to go back to like the 2008, 2012, and that just from 2020, and then with COVID, and then the tech bubble right in 2022. So just in the last 5 years, we've had some two huge things that have impacted our workforces. And the really crazy thing is when you think about like the tech bubble, you think of it as just a standalone, but really and truly that has impacted all of us out here outside of the tech industry as well. So here's the thing. Who does this? Us. Who has to be a part of the meetings deciding who is going to be let go? It's HR. Who gets to communicate it to the employees? It's HR. Again, there's
Oh, yeah.
it.
Yeah. Because
Oh,
the C suite
yeah.
isn't having that conversation.
Heck
They're going to avoid that, you know,
no.
10-foot
Again,
pole. See you later.
This is why it's whine with HR, because we whine and have to whine because they will not touch it with a 10-foot pole. So these are the people that we've worked with maybe a year, maybe 6 months, maybe 20 years, right? So you have a relationship with these people, and now all of a sudden you have to tell them, I'm sorry, but we have to let you go. Not only that, as I mentioned in our last episode, even HR, we are being impacted by this. And again, usually it's those companies that really don't understand what we offer and what we do. That, of course, we do have we're an operational function. We're a money function, even though again, they don't realize it. And so I think that when people look to or companies look to some areas that maybe they can cut, we all of a sudden go from 5 HR people down to two. And so now you're going down to two, and then you are trying to explain to these employees what's happening when you yourself are like, yeah, I just lost half my staff, so I don't even know what to tell you right now. Because of that, then some of the challenges that they talk about, employee morale and trust. I was actually just teaching a seminar, was it last week or the week before? And one of the attendees in my class was talking about this very thing. They were going through a restructuring and the impact it has had on the trust, not just trust of HR, but trust of the C-suite, the management. Like the employees are constantly wary. They're walking on eggshells. They are worrying more about if they're next than actually getting the job done. So, where does that go? That disengagement that we have been talking a lot about. Um, and not just that, you don't want employees to not feel valued. Julie and I are always talking about heard, valued, respected. Look, layoffs are going to happen, but there are ways, again, going back to my favorite, the why, and yes, I'm jumping to the solutions too. But it being transparent again, do you remember, Julie, a couple of years ago when transparency, like 5 years ago, I think it was what it was, like all of a sudden the new big word was transparency. And I'm like, really? We weren't being honest and open with our employees from the get-go?
You know we weren't. I mean, come on. That's the
But
whole
like,
like don't talk about your salary with anybody. You can't tell people that. Just FYI, in case you're all out
no,
there like wondering, you can't.
no,
Can't tell
no.
people they can't talk about their salaries with each other or their raises or their bonuses or their comp. So, yeah. No, we
NLRA.
yes, yes. We historically companies have not felt that they needed to tell employees anything.
But
So,
isn't that amazing to you? Like
mhm.
I don't, because of the way you and I operate and just because of who we are and what we've always done, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, really? All of a sudden you're like, this is the thing that's going to save us. Duh.
Yeah. So I think the Tricia will go over the rest of the solutions, but I think one of the biggest things, and again, it does go with our transparency talk, but it always comes back to communication. You are allowed to feel bad. You are allowed to show that this is hurting you as well. So again, I know lawyers, we are the ones who told everybody they had to be robots and you shouldn't show emotion and this, that, and the other thing. But you know what? Riffs are awful on everybody. Everybody. The people who stay now have at least twice as much work, maybe more. They've also seen their friends have to leave. The people who leave have to figure out another way to work. HR has to deliver the messages, which is not fun in any way, shape, or form. And so I think it's really important anytime a riff is happening. Again, communication is key, but don't don't ignore the emotional impact of a riff. Again, it is not just something that happens. And never ever use the phrase, it's not personal, because
Oh my gosh, that is the worst.
it is to the person who just lost their job. So, emotional intelligence is really, really important right here. So, again, that's just, I think it's really important on so many levels. So, the conversation that you have with the person who is getting laid off is one thing, and you can express sympathy and empathy, and you should, if possible, give some resources with like job placement, counseling, etc. All of those things are great. Um, but you also have to talk to the people who are staying because they're like, what the heck is going to happen? We already had too much work. Now we got to do the work of five people. And what does that look like? And what am I going to be judged on? You know, and I'm not getting a raise because you just had to lay off a bunch of people, but now I'm doing the work of five people. So you got to have those conversations as well. And so it really, really is that is the first solution. So I just stole that, but it's transparent communication. Like you've got to be honest with people, and you've got to be upfront about the fact that it sucks and things might suck for a while, but we're a team, and we do want, again, going back to what we started talking about, we want feedback from you about how we can make it less painful. If it's got to be painful, there hopefully are ways that it can be made less painful. And don't assume you know what those ways are. Talk to your employees.
Well, yeah, because they're the ones who do the work every day. So they are the ones who probably have thought, why can't we do this? Why haven't we done that? And of course, the answer is, well, we've always done it this way and it's not broken. So why fix it? My least favorite answer ever. Um, I do want to go further into something that you talked about already, Jules, which is the support for affected employees. I think that this, and I know that we've talked about this once or before, but that I always think of Deborah when I think about this because she has been in a role where that's what she did. The company that she was working with, as they were letting people go, one of their big things was trying to find support and outplacement, sending them to career counseling, helping them try to find jobs within either the same industry or other industries. Hey, you're interested in this? Let's check this out. So I always say, we are human resources after all. So be a resource. Really focus on and genuinely focus on what kind of support that you can give your employees. I just think this is huge because you don't know when you're going to have a boom again. You don't know when you might want to say, hey, we could bring some people back. So I really would remind you, what comes around goes around is how they say it. But more importantly, what Julie and I say is just it's more than just treating others how you want to be treated, right? We always use that the golden rule plus, which is think about how you would want to be treated or how they would want to be treated by you. And I just think that that will help you through a time like this with that empathy and sympathy that Julie was already talking about. The other thing that I think we have to go back up to the challenges because Julie and I kind of keep going between the challenges and the solutions. But the legal and compliance issues, I think this is a huge one that a lot of companies really don't think about. You want to make sure that you are conducting those layoffs within the boundaries of the law. There are certain things, and we're not going to get into that right now, but there are certain things that you have to do to make sure that you're not violating any laws, especially if you have, say, a particular group of employees that's, oh, I don't know, over 40, just as an example. And so please, 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 if you are considering something like this, get help. Reach out to Julie and I. We would be happy to talk about some of those compliance issues that you might have to face. And again, I've already said this when it came to talking about the support for your employees, but remember, you may have to rebuild. At some point, you may have to rebuild. And so wouldn't it be lovely to be able to have those people back? In the meantime, though, how are you going to manage the loss of skills? Julie was just talking about that kind of in a roundabout way, but she was dead on in that, look, you need to have a productive team out of those members who are left. How is it that you are going to do that? And I think one of the best ways to do that is, again, something that we've already talked about several times, which is encouraging engagement. And then, of course, that focus on retention. Let people know, look, this is not what we wanted to do. Here's the reason. Oh, by the way, this is the other thing that we were having the conversation in that class I was telling you about. Part of their solution was really reaching out to the employees and saying, here you go. This is why we've had to make this change. Here's what we're planning on doing. And they were really transparent, like from leadership down, and just the conversations that she said that the leadership had, open and honest, saying to everybody, ask us your questions about what's happening and we will be honest with you. And they made sure that they absolutely were, even if it didn't paint them in the best light. And now the employees that are still there are like, okay, we got this. So I think that if you are doing that, then the employees who are left, they will really work hard. They will focus, but you got to give them that support. Continue to develop them, listen to their ideas, all the things that we have already said at least 10 times in our discussion, in order to really be able to um, make the layoffs worth it.
Yeah, I think, I agree with everything you just said. And I think that it is really important to be authentic and truthful. And again, I blame the legal profession from
We get
which,
blamed a
you
lot,
know,
don't we?
yeah,
And
yeah.
well,
But yeah, I mean, I think I've shared this before, but I was taught early on in my legal career, labor and employment attorney, tell people that just tell people they're fired. You don't have to tell them why. You don't have to, write anything particular up. Like just tell them they're fired. And I understand why that was because it's employment at will, and technically you can fire anybody at any time for any lawful reason. But what I saw throughout my career as a litigator is that if you don't tell them exactly why whatever is happening, they make up stories and they are never the one at fault, even
no.
even if they were, and that's how lawsuits get filed.
Uh,
So I have switched and said, oh no, give them as much information as you can. There are going to be lines where yes, you can't share everything with employees, but be as truthful and upfront as you can be, because that is going to make a world of difference. And we talked about this a lot when we were talking about leaders who make mistakes, and owning your mistakes can actually build more trust than sweeping it under the rug. Well, it's the same thing here. The organization has to own up to any mistakes it's made in the past when going through these changes, but you also need to be truthful and authentic about what is happening and how that impacts the company, because those employees, we've said it before, but your employees are most often your most expensive and most important resource. And if you do not give them the truthfulness and candor that they deserve, they are not going to stick around. Like if I don't feel that I can trust the organization and they're going through a riff and I'm one now going to be taking on the job of, three or four people, I'm looking. I'm looking.
oh,
And if they if
absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
And if they handled that riff badly, yeah, but one foot's out the door already. Like I'm trying to figure out, I'm at home going, is there any way I can just quit and figure it out after? Like I don't even want to stick around for the excuses or whatever is going to come out. So that transparent communication is so incredibly important. And again, you don't have to be a robot. Like if I'm telling somebody they're getting laid off, I'm going to be like, this is a really hard for me to talk about with you because I respect you and I know that this is going to have a major impact on your life and it's out of your control. And sadly, it's out of mine. And I want to make this as easy as it can be. It ain't gonna be easy, but like whatever resources I can give you, whatever support I can give you, that is what my goal is. And that's not a difficult conversation to have, but I think we've been scared into thinking we can't show empathy or compassion when we have to do these terrible things. But again, my experience as a labor and employment litigator, if somebody was told why they were fired, so again moving outside of riffs, but let's say they're fired, and they're told why, even if they don't agree with it, the fact that they were told and somebody had a conversation with them makes them far less likely to file a lawsuit
Well,
because
and then there should be documentation relating to that,
yes,
right? So if they
yes,
try to
yes,
make up something, even a lawyer that's out there is going to look at it and go, whoa, whoa. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just one of those things. I do feel bad that we have sort of set this precedent that you can't show emotion when you're talking to somebody. But again, most of the lawsuits that I saw were from employees who these are the things they often said. They never told me why I was fired and they never asked for my side of the story. Those are like the two big things. And so
What,
again,
Julie,
if you
why
don't,
is that? Why is
well,
that? Why wouldn't you ask someone's side of the story?
again, I think some of it is age old advice from attorneys that you don't have to tell them. And to be fair, we all know those people that you were like, nope, you have to have a script. You were not allowed to talk off the cuff because that's like bad, like bad things are going to happen. So there's that.
Oh,
So,
non-HR firings, you mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So yes, like if it's just a manager or supervisor or somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience with that,
Yes,
it
finesse.
can it can be a disaster. Um, they could be too compassionate or not compassionate
Hmm.
enough. But and then again, we always tell people you don't have to tell them why, and why limit it to one thing if you don't have to. But what I found is then people would file a lawsuit and say, well, they never told me why, so it has to be because they're discriminating against me, or whatever the case may be. And there could be a 400-page personnel file with all the times they documented all the problems, but they didn't tell the person that was it. And so they're
Yeah,
going to look for a reason. And generally, when people are looking for a reason, it is not to blame themselves, it is to blame someone else. So,
for sure.
you know, so again,
Yep.
I've seen it time and time again. And so I think it's really important in all of these situations we've been talking about to just have frank and honest conversations with employees like, hey, we've got to make some changes. This is coming from the C-suite, but we've got to do it and we got to figure out how to do it in the way that has the least negative impact. And I want your thoughts on that. That's a totally different conversation and a different feeling than it is what it is. So just do it.
My heart just broke when you said those words. And I think too, the other thing is, and just to go back to what you were saying, employees are always going to come up with the worst reason. right? It could have nothing to do with the reason you let them go, but they will always come up with the worst thing that they could possibly think of. And why not? They're feeling scared, they're feeling disappointed, they're feeling uh, let down by the company. So all of these things, y'all, are things that you may have experienced, and we would like to prevent you from experiencing them again. I think obviously we've talked a lot about the rifts or firings or things like that, but please don't forget to listen to some of our previous episodes from, well, all of our seasons, but especially this one, because I really do think that we focus a lot of our time and energy trying to explain to you guys, listen, a little bit of an investment goes a long way. And that little investment could be an emotional one, just letting people know that you care, that you're hearing them, that you're listening. Working on communication. I think that one of the things that we didn't talk too much about in this one, but the remote and hybrid workforce, workplace management, Julie touched on it a little bit earlier. I think that is one of the biggest ones. Our managers, it's tough enough for them to actually manage those who are directly in front of them, let alone trying to increase engagement with those who are outside the workforce. And we have given, again, in our previous episodes, so go back and check them out if you haven't listened, a bunch of, I think, fantastic solutions for increasing engagement for those who are in your workforce, that are in office, and those who are remote. By the way, it says in this article that 22% of the workforce is expected to be fully remote this year in 2025. I feel like that's a lot lower than I would expect. And again, I do realize that we're doing a lot of pull back into the office, but with all the pushback that we're seeing, I just feel like that 22% is a super low number.
I would agree with that. I would think it is still much higher than that. But yeah, again, like, the example, we don't want to get too much into the remote and hybrid workplace management, but we've talked about the proximity bias, the visibility bias, and just this like, but it's usually larger companies. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I think one of the main driving forces behind bringing people back into the office is because they spent all this money on office buildings, and then for 2 years they had a bunch of empty space, and now they're like, we can't continue to do this, but we're stuck in our lease, so back in you go. um just my personal opinion. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just spitballing here, but anyway. um Final thoughts.
Julie,
So,
you
oh, yes, go ahead.
you just mentioned bias.
I did.
Yeah, we need to touch just really quick on our DE&I and bias, and managing bias in hiring, diversity in candidates. We have to, just for a quick minute before we give our final thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the things, we've touched on diversity, equity, and inclusion a few different times, and we've talked about how there are people and organizations and a lot of legislators that are demonizing DEI. But the stats show that employees still think it's important. So, from a Glassdoor study, and this is in the article, which of course we will link to in the show notes, recently found that 76% of job seekers and employees consider a diverse workforce to be an important factor when evaluating job offers. That's three-fourths, people.
That is
Three-fourths.
such a big number.
It's a
I'm
big
so proud of
number.
us.
I know. You usually don't see numbers that big. So,
No.
um, I think it's important to remember that employees want diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, that can take many shapes and many forms, but we can't, or we shouldn't, form our policies and our priorities based on whatever the political landscape is at the time. What you should be looking for is what is right for our company, what fits with our core values, our mission, our vision, and also look for the benefits. I think a lot of times, again, DEI has kind of become this like code word, even though it's three letters and it's really an acronym, but I'm being picky. Anyway, DEI has become like this, you know, bad word. Uh, but again, if you really think about what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, and also that employees want someplace where they can feel free to be themselves. And that is part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, it's making a space for everybody to feel comfortable with who they are in the workplace. And again, we're not excusing vile comments, harassment, discrimination, retaliation, any of those types of things. But it is a really important factor. And again, I think we tend to look at the negatives, especially when it's being demonized, but let's look at the positives. Again, we've talked about them, but there are studies out there that show that a diverse employee pool is going to get you more innovation, a better return on investment, a bigger bottom line, like all of those things. There really is a case for it. So I would encourage those of you who are listening, and some of this can be intangible, but to, start looking around and saying, how does diversity impact us in a positive way? And start listing some of those things out, particularly in HR, because again, yes, we can't always measure everything, but if you can start showing concrete examples, people love anecdotal evidence. They love it. Like, is it statistically significant? Not, but people love hearing it, right? So if you can say, like, if you can look around and say, oh, you know what? This particular team is really diverse and they've come up with a bunch of innovations that have made this company X percentage more than the year before or this year, whatever the case may be. But if you start looking for the positives, just like we've talked about with confirmation bias, you're going to find them. If you're always looking for the negatives, you're going to find
You're
them.
going to find them.
So,
That's exactly right. Well, and
right.
I think, Julie, the other reason why it's turned into such a negative is that people, again, it's being politicized. But the big thing is, at least as far as I'm concerned, like people are thinking of it like, oh, well, we can't hire one group in favor of another group, or we can't demonize this group and then hire this group. And we can't say, oh, well, we prefer this person over that person. DE&I has never been about that. It is about looking at the teams and giving every single candidate or every person that works for you equal equity, equal opportunity. And that's all it's ever been about. It is not the same as affirmative action, which again, we have talked about before. But the idea behind this is really looking at your people and saying, are we really listening to her idea versus his? And if we're listening to his and not hers, is it because she's female? Is it because that she has been considered flighty? Or is it because she's considered the B word? Oh, and you know what they call a man where a female is considered a B? What do they call a man, Julie, that has the same personality traits? A leader.
Yep.
They call him a leader.
Yep.
And again, I am not man hating. I love I love you all men out there. Those of you who are listening, you know that. Um, but the whole idea is that we need to make sure that we really are giving everyone an opportunity to be who they are. Now, I'm not saying bring your drama. I've said this before. I don't want your drama, but you know what? Something in my past may give me an idea that could change us. Listen to what Julie was saying in some of our past episodes, when we were talking about innovation, it was driven from a need and someone thought outside the box. If we all think the same way, if we're all cookie cutter, if we all come from the same space, same socioeconomic status, the same religion, we're all men, we're all women, we're all the same color, we're all the same ethnicity, we're all going to start thinking alike. And so that it's that makes us stronger. I'm sorry, I'm getting all emotional.
No, but it's a very good point. And I think again, it's not DEI is not just diversity. It's those other two pieces, equity, which you just talked about, and inclusion. And so I know we've said this before, but a lot of companies, you can't change your diversity overnight. Because a lot of that is sort of baked into the cake, like the pipelines that you have and whatever that it takes intention to broaden that, but it can take sometimes several years before the impact is actually showing versus because you gotta make a lot of changes that and it may not seem like any progress is being made, but um down the line there is progress. So I think that that is an important thing to keep in mind, but it's also those equity and inclusion pieces, and the inclusion you can absolutely do something about right now, and the inclusion again goes through everything we talked about today. When we're talking about communication, we're talking about inclusive communication. So, not just again talking at, I was listening to a show, I'm not going to divulge which because it will all make you think less of me, but let's just say it was some reality TV, but they had a really good, they had a really good I, I'm
No.
a little, I'm a little bit embarrassed about this, so that's okay. But anyway, there was a therapist on the show, and I thought this was such a powerful statement. There's a difference between talking at somebody and talking to somebody, and then there's also talking with somebody. So that I think oftentimes, and some of the challenges that we talked about today highlight this. Leadership talks at employees,
Um,
not to
Yep.
them or with them. And so I think that it is important to keep that in mind as well. And as you are looking, HR, this is where you guys can shine because usually we are better at having those conversations and we're better at knowing that they need to happen. And so if you can, when we get to, it'll be an episode soon, but like getting HR into the C suite, when you have that kind of influence, you can really be impactful because you can explain to the C suite level why something is so important and what benefit it is going to have. So, and a lot of times you're going to be the best position to have those conversations.
I think, Julie, I'm so in love with that, by the way. But you also said something else about a minute or so ago that made me think of something else. We're talking about increasing your pools and making sure that you have a more diverse talent pool. But here's something that I've talked to a lot of people about, and that is so great. Now we have this increased talent pool, or we have this diverse representation, but now they're gone because people forget about the equity and inclusion part. These three words, they have to go together. If you increase your diversity and people don't feel welcomed, if they don't feel like they're a part of everything that's going on, and if they're not treated equally, they're gonna leave. So that change that you're waiting for, those numbers or those anecdotal stories, they're not gonna happen if you don't have the whole package.
Mic drop. Boom. All right. I think that is a good place to transition to our final thoughts.
Yeah.
So I will make mine nice and short, and I'm just going to say communicate, communicate, communicate.
I really encourage everybody to take a look at this article. I think that it really does summarize a lot of the things that Julie and I have been talking about this season. I think it is, and I especially love the solutions. Everybody knows that I'm the one who says, come at me with solutions, not problems. So that's one of the reasons I really, really like this article. I think that they give, like you said, some of their solutions are really outside of the box, some things that we haven't heard before. So my final thoughts, other than that, would be focus on empathy, focus on communication. Like Julie already said, I think you really stole it with the communication, Jules. I just talking with your employees, explaining to them the why is going to make all the difference in the world.
I agree. Yes. Remember, human resources. Human, always first. Okay, so let's wrap this episode up. I was drinking different wine because this one, again, it's a little sweet for me, but I'm going to give it another taste and see what I think. Again, too sweet for me, but it's uncanny how much it tastes like it's like some key lime pie. I'm very
It's
impressed
killing
with that
me.
aspect. I'm very impressed with that. So I'm gonna take the rest of the bottle home to my sister who has more of this type of palate and share it with
Nice.
her and see what she thinks. So um, key lime pie. If you need a dessert wine, it's pretty good.
Well, and here you go. If you don't have time to make a key lime pie, which you know is one of my favorite pies to make, I would say go ahead and just pick that bottle up and be like, here's dessert, everyone.
Yeah, with the sleeve of graham crackers.
Yes. Oh, wait. Oh my gosh, Jules, I am like if I am picturing some s'mores with I mean
Ooh,
sweet overload, okay?
yeah,
But
a little
oh
bit.
my goodness, but I could just see like some s'mores and oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, Trish, tell us your final thoughts on your wine.
It's delicious. I can't wait to drink it with you and Deb. It's
I know
so good.
I'm shocked. I was going to her house and she was like, "Oh, I found this wine. I think that you would like it." She sent me a picture. I'm like, "Oh no, I've had it. I like it." And then I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know, pigs are flying because we do not have similar taste in wine." So the fact that
No.
three of us have found a bottle we like, it's very good. So okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us. We hope you found this episode helpful. And hey, if you need some free training, tell your managers to subscribe to our podcast because we got all sorts of stuff that they can learn from, and our fellow HR professionals as well. So thank you, as always, for joining us. Please email us with wine recommendations, topic recommendations. Um, if you don't like something we've said or done, just be gentle about it, but we'd love to hear it. And if you just want to say hi, our email is WHINE at monarchendeavorsllc.com. It'll be in the show notes. And with that, we bid you all adieu. Cheers.
Cheers.